What happens when you purify your body, your mind, your spirit? Something miraculous. The body begins to heal itself. Welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, where each week we explore new ways to heal your body from the root, igniting your inner healer. You are the medicine. And now, here's your host, Robin Stebbins.
So welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, Jamie Andrews, second podcast with you. Smartest guy that I know, because you can take science, the cult of science that I've now seen it as, and actually not throw it away. You haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. You've dissected in a very, I think, intelligent way what we can keep, what we can use, and what is just absolute garbage that we need to throw away. Because what I wanted to center the conversation around, again, we can talk about anything, but is isolation. And I think if we can figure out and explain to people the isolation myth, all the better, because you can't sell vitamins and supplements then if we've debunked the isolation idea. So I'm not from a science background. I mean, I have my RN license, and so I took chemistry and you know, all of that, but I didn't go deep into it. So I wasn't indoctrinated into the system, and then I didn't have to come back to where you are now. And so if first introduce yourself, everyone knows who you are on my my podcast, but introduce yourself, maybe some things that you've recently been doing, maybe something that we don't know, and then let's just dive right into debunking this isolation myth.
Cool. Hey, Robin. Yeah, it's been, I don't know, a couple of years since we did our last interview, which was great. We covered so many topics. We've both kind of been on this journey where I think we've kind of come to similar conclusions about these things independently. Actually truly independently, which has been really nice. And now we can kind of meet up a couple of years later and have a chat about it. And I think that's kind of, purist science in itself. Hi, I'm Jamie Andrews. I'm running the Virology Control Studies project. We are running experiments falsifying the virological methodology and more lately the genetics fraud and PCR fraud. And you say that, I kind of look at things in a scientific manner, and I think that I don't really like science. I'm kind of like anti-science. The more that I look at it, the more that I realize that the entire thing is kind of corrupted. And I prefer to think of it as logic, or what you call cowgirl logic, and logic is actually the kind of purist science that has been subverted from all of the power plays that have happened within politics and big pharma. And I mean, it's essentially statism, where they have taken what is common sense, what is logic, and applied layers and layers of bullshit to confuse and baffle people. I wanted to just pull up a quote very quickly, and I think it's kind of funny because it's Nikola Tesla. Scientists today have substituted mathematicians for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. Now, I don't really want to go into Nikola Tesla because I believe, with not a lot of evidence, but I'm fairly sure that he's a scripted character. I would question whether he even exists, but I'm fairly sure that if he did exist, the surroundings of what he claimed to find and all of the kind of offshoots of what happens within free energy, in my opinion, is complete bullshit. I think,
agree with
and
you.
no much more than we were talking just off camera before we got on about Tesla's the modern day iteration of Mr. Musk and his kind of world domination through his battery powered cars and shit like that. It's fairly obvious to me that, he's using this, scripted kind of history that has been bent to give the appearance that he is some freedom warrior and very caring for all of us, right? But whatever the ramifications are of who Nikola Tesla was, whether it was true or not, I think that the quote is very, very true and very, very apt to what we're going to be talking about. Is that what he's essentially saying is that mathematicians in this case, and I think a lot of people do reel very, very quickly when yourself and myself say it's not just mathematicians, it's chemists. And I think this is the core of what we're talking about here, is if you just substitute in that quote, chemists for mathematicians, chemists are applying equations upon equations, and they move away from what is reality so very quickly that they're completely disconnected from any sort of visceral. And it's more than just seeing. It's more than just seeing. It's kind of experiential. And this is kind of really that's the kind of top line to everything that I think that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things that I have seen is all of the people that have come to the same conclusions have completely different backgrounds. Like David Parker is an electrical engineer. You come from the field. I come from, working on a ranch. And if it works, you do it. If it doesn't, you don't. And so you learn that very quickly. And so what we're talking about is absolute base level logic.
Yes.
And logic has to fall apart in this whole system because they can't build their house of cards on the logic. You have to build the cartoon characters. You have to build this framework of smoke and mirrors to make all of their other equations make sense. And that's what I learned, when I was getting my bachelor's degree in psychology. What was it? The 30% rule. 30% get better, 30% stay the same, 30% get worse, no matter what treatment they have. So whether it's nothing, whether they take psychotropics, whatever it is. So they're telling you right there, this whole field is baloney.
Yeah.
Right. But all the studies have to use the previous studies in their paper to go based on, now we're going to conduct this experiment based on the previous experiments. So you touch upon a great point that it's, when you look at peer reviewed clinical testing of drugs, and that's really what we're talking about. And so, I find it quite funny that when yourself and myself are challenging the notion of essentially chemical isolation, people kind of rebuke at this, but really what we are challenging is the fundamentals of pharmaceutical drugs, right? And vitamins and supplements and
vitamins and supplements, just everything to do with a kind of extraneous chemical that could be given to a person, which they claim cures people or doesn't in most instances. And like you say, I think that I've always said that I have no skin in the game, which makes it easier for me, because when people do reel at the idea that, and it was easy for me in terms of isolation, because just kind of skipping back a little bit, in terms of isolation, obviously, I've done the experiments to show that viral isolation is fraudulent. The cell culture isolation of viruses happens irrespective of the sample that you put in. So we have shown that categorically, conclusively over the past 2 years with no rebuttal. I have to conclude that, considering it would be so easy for any virologist, any microbiologist to reach into a store cabinet and pull out the materials at basically zero cost to themselves and do this experiment on the side that not a single person has, I must conclude that the experiments stand and they have yet to be debunked. So for me, that there was kind of visceral experimentation for understanding the lack of isolation in viruses. So when it came to the idea of, hey, what about a vitamin? It was even easier, because at least with viruses, they're pointing at something. They're pointing at something in a petri dish and saying, okay, this here is a biological entity. Now, we've had to go in and prove that those images of a claimed virus are not, because we went in, we took those uninfected cultures, and we used the microscope, zoomed in and found identical 27 different particles that look identical to 27 different types of viruses. And so we falsify the physical realm that they claim a virus occupies. And so I would say that I'm confident that we have proved the viruses do not exist. And so when the next subject kind of comes along, it was incredibly easy for me. It was just like, well, they can't even show you a picture of it. It's all into molecular chemistry. Right. And once you take it into molecular chemistry, we'll go back to the Nikola Tesla quote, that's kind of another layer of equations put onto it. Okay, you can't see it. Why? Because it's claimed to be too small. Okay, well, how do you measure it? How do you measure? If you can't see it, then what is the product, what is the thing that you are claiming as evidence of a vitamin existing? And this was kind of a lot more apparent to me when looking and coming to the conclusion about how the PCR test was fraudulent, because it was potentially about 6 months of pacing backwards and forwards in my kitchen with a pretty pained expression on my face, kind of going, what is going on here? I haven't released the results because I don't need to quite yet. But I can tell you kind of how I came to a lot of these conclusions is that I bought a NAT test. It's a kind of home PCR test with the very, very lovely contributions of Substack readers. Managed to donate enough money, because these things they're relatively affordable, but a little bit inaccessible. We're talking a couple of $1,000 for these test kits. You get these reagent cards, and they come with 7 different little bits of powder in them, and you have a little box that you connect to the computer, and it acts a bit like a PCR thermocycler. It's very noddy stuff. The lab technicians would kind of rebuke at it, and they don't really like these things. More basically because you and me, laymen, can get hold of this equipment. Now, what they don't really tell you is that, okay, the machines look a little bit noddy, and they're kind of rebuked in higher, society status with lab technicians, but the actual powders themselves, the reagents, come directly from New England Biolabs, who are like the major manufacturer of PCR reagents.
Right.
They are using the chemicals that are used in every single, decent high-profile PCR. So I spent 6 months throwing the kitchen at it, literally opening the cupboard doors and, okay, let's put tomato ketchup in there and see what, not quite that stupid, but you get what I mean. I came pretty close to doing some of these things, and I can tell you a couple of things. It's sensitive. It is sensitive. It will take very, very tiny amounts of stuff, and it moves the needle with very small increments of stuff. I will also tell you that it tested positive for human samples, because they have a baseline which they claim acts as a kind of control that you are testing it for a human sample. So they say it measures a thing called B-actin, and it's a certain sequence that registers that it's human. And I got that human sequence to register positive with stuff that could not possibly have contained human DNA.
Right.
I could not get it to test positive for viral genes, but that's caveated with the fact that I just got it too positive. Now, there's this threshold that's inbuilt into the software that if it becomes too positive too quickly, it registers it as negative. I was able to put stuff in that would just send it off the scale. It would just go bang, this thing is far too positive. What you have here is they just called it an invalid result.
Right.
And so I managed to get positives whenever I wanted to for monkeypox, for SARS-CoV-2, for all of the reagents kits that they had.
With using what specifically?
Yeah. And the things that worked specifically were things that contained high levels of what chemists or molecular biologists would call ionic content or ionic metals. So things like phosphate, things with interesting amounts of magnesium, potassium, things like that. So, and I know through your work, and I agree with vast proportions of it, about the magnesium claim, about your wonderful work on the fable of elements, that they're a kind of classification, and we can probably talk about this a little bit later on, because I think it's kind of taking away from kind of where I'm going with the PCR thing. So I showed that to myself, really, that because I couldn't really be any more specific than I was putting egg yolk in and it was going off the scale. And egg yolk is known to contain quite a lot of phosphate in it. So that's one of the things that was just sending the results straight over the edge and giving me back intrinsic positives from these things. And so I came to the conclusion that it must be testing for ionic content. And I kind of, as I said, I had this kind of pacing around the kitchen type moment where it was like, well, if you get a strange result of PCR, they verify it in a thing called gel electrophoresis, where they take it's the most stupid of tests. It's so logical to me and you. We just look at this and go, that's ridiculous. It's a dish full of jelly that they put battery electrodes into it, literally almost like a car battery electrode, one side, positive one side, negative one side. They put the sample in, they turn the battery on, and then they watch the sample migrate to either pole. And this is used as verification for the PCR test. Okay, so when they get anything wrong, a strange result that they get, they put it in this jelly, they turn the battery on, and they go, okay, well, it's expected to move this far towards either one of the poles. And if it doesn't move towards the expected distance, then they'll say, well, it's just a byproduct, or, what they call it is an artifact.
An artifact,
okay. An artifact. They call it primer dimer, and this is an artifact where the primer has attached to itself and replicated itself. It's all this jargon stuff.
Pretty much say anything.
Yeah, they can. The dingle arm, connected to the translocator and transmogrified in the wrong fashion. It is just made up on the spot and then agreed to be the nomenclature that they describe abject failure with, and so this was kind of my aha moment, that it's just measuring charge, because they tell you it is just measuring charge from one side to the other side of a pole and how far it goes. And really, this was the kind of cascade that set off where I am now with my thoughts on molecular chemistry, all the way down to, atomistic and molecular biochemistry, all the way down to the whole subject of chemistry, is that when I started to look what else was being used to verify, being verified by gel electrophoresis, it was practically every single biochemical out there. So you're talking proteins, you're talking hormones, you're talking saccharides, you're talking antigens, antibodies, basically every single biomarker that is taken as a measure of your health or what's going on within your body is measured in the same way.
Yes.
Gel electrophoresis, they're measuring charge. That's it. There is no other point of reference that they have.
And isn't that what they're doing though with all testing? So we can all agree that the results are okay. So it was a little more towards this pole than that pole, but what they do is they make up a test that they know that they can manipulate. Like everything is going to have a different charge. We know that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that. Even a child would be able to figure that out. And so then they can take that information that we all agree on, and they can then interpret it and say,
correct,
this is what it means. This is how we know that there is magnesium inside this food, or this is how we know there's iodine in the body, as opposed to we all can observe it, but we don't know what it means.
Yeah. I mean, this is the end product. Because I got in maybe about 3 years ago, I got into a conversation with a troll on Twitter, and I did get them to kind of admit this, and it was a bit of a curveball to me at the time, is that we were talking about falsifying proteins then, the proteomics of HIV. And they kind of said, okay, well, you would just verify it in a gel and then verify it with genetic sequencing. And I said, well, what if you debunk that? What if I go away and I falsify that? And he said, oh, it's fine, really. We just go through into mass spec. So really, all roads lead to mass spec.
Right.
When you're talking about anything, because there's this real kind of delineation and cutoff within virology that I got to with microscopy. It was kind of microscopy, and then it was like, right, well, what's next? You move straight into genetics, and genetics is just molecular chemistry, really. That's what they're talking about. They're pushing it all in that direction. And so all roads, when it leads to this, like gel electrophoresis with biochemistry, and I'll use quotation marks with biochemistry,
right,
is the same with all things to do with chemistry, is mass spectrometry. Everything down that they measure on a molecular front comes down to essentially mass spectrometry. There are a few different iterations, as there always are, because they like to obscure these things. But essentially, every single one of those techniques measures things in the same way with charge. So mass spectrometry, what they do is they take a sample, they ionize it, they sputter it, so they put it into very fine particulate form into like a spray.
What does ionize it mean? How do they ionize it?
They charge it. They put I think it's a negative charge on it to make sure that it bends, right? Because the ultimate thing is that they have an electromagnet in it. They fire the sputtered sample past this electromagnet. The electromagnet pulls the heavier charged or the more charged particles towards the magnet more than the less charged particles, and then it hits a register at the end, and you get this kind of scatter of the particulates. I mean, talk about throwing shit at a wall, right? That's literally what they're doing, right? They are throwing shit at the wall and putting an electromagnet in between you and the shit on the wall, And the stuff on the right-hand side, they're saying, well, that's a heavier molecule than the stuff on the left because the electromagnet has pulled the ionized stuff more.
Right.
And the funny thing is that they even have to ionize it, right? I mean, your immediate kind of logic thing pulls it out and goes, well, surely if it's, ionized already, these are the huge amount of uncontrolled parts to it is like, and I have had a brief look at this kind of stuff. Has anybody ever tried to do it without ionizing? Well, it just wouldn't work, right? It's no shit. Like you're measuring the amount of charge of stuff and you're pre-charging it. I mean, I think
have you ever heard of I'm sure you have this old fable where it's a village of starving people and this gypsy comes wandering through with a rock and says, I can make you a big soup out of rock. And so they put the rock into the big cauldron and then they said, well, to bring out the flavor of the rock, we could put some water in. And then, so they're all waiting for the soup and they said, and to be honest, if we added some carrots and some meat and so they keep adding things and the whole village keeps adding things till they have soup. But this to me seems exactly like what we're doing in isolating anything, whether it's a virus, a vitamin, we're adding all of this shit.
Yeah.
One thing, and an acid here and a electrically charging this here and there and there.
Yeah.
But we're calling it an isolate.
Yes.
And that's really what I'm after because I call it chemical soup.
Yes. For
lack of a better word, because you've just simply, I couldn't, if I told you, Jamie, I found an alien. And the first thing I did was I burned it to ashes. And then I add some sulfuric acid and I reacted to that. And now look what I've discovered, what the alien was made out of. But you wouldn't know anything, nor would anyone else about that alien because I've destroyed it.
Yeah.
And turned it into a chemical soup. And that's what we're talking about, like when you're saying the mass spectrometry or you're adding charge to something, we're taking what was original and we're destroying it.
Yeah.
And then we're calling it, then we're saying, now I know what it is. Yeah.
No, they're brilliant points. And I think going back, because I didn't want to talk about the fable of elements, the fake fictitious order of things,
everyone's Bible, a chemist's Bible, to say something against the Holy Sacrament without me having the proper degrees.
You walk into any school science laboratory and it's right there, right?
Yeah.
This denotes that we are doing science here, ladies and gentlemen, because we have a periodic table on the wall.
Yes.
Maybe if I just on each of the bricks put like M, G, and K and whatever, then I would be taken as a serious scientist. Not that I want to be. But I think that you nailed it in the fact that really the kind of classification, this deep desire to classify, pigeonhole, and trademark and patent things so that they are essentially saleable commodities and ways that you can control and manipulate using quote unquote science. Right. So they take these things and they, like you say, with every single one of these processes, whether it be lithium, whether it be oxygen, whether it be carbon, whether it be, all of these things, they are obliterating them until they can be obliterated no more. And they end up with a thing that is only verified by essentially its test. Obviously, when you're talking about the difference between gases and solid, between metal and non-metal, you have some variation, obviously, between state, and you have some variation in the way that they react to other things that they've obliterated. But past that, this kind of inanimate object that they have compartmentalized into a thing is only really verified by the test. It is a circular reasoned inference. And I know Pete and Pete talk about inferences really well. We've interviewed them, and unfortunately they're stepped away from YouTube for the moment. Hopefully they'll be back. But they talk about inferences, and this is really what we're talking about, is that when you have a test for something that is not direct evidence, it is indirect evidence that is only it's only a marker in and of itself, if that makes sense. When you and this is the problem when you come to getting your bloods done. So you go in, you say, "Oh, I'm not feeling particularly well. I recently had a guy come to me asking for my advice on taking hormone therapy." He said he went in. I was feeling tired, lacking a bit of libido, and I just felt that I needed to get myself checked out. Stupidly, he said, I don't really know why, but these are the things. Came back that I had low testosterone, and in a kind of moment of madness, I almost got into giving myself some sort of hormone therapy. What do you think? And I said, well, the idea that you take your blood and they are already looking for a specific thing. So they already are testing for testosterone. So there's a very specific, band that they're looking for, essentially the same types of stuff with charge, because it's a hormone. Right. Like I reiterated before, all of these things are essentially down the line. Even if they're doing some of the chemical tests in proteomics with Kumasi blue and things like that, which are other chemicals added to it, and you get a change. So you add this with iodine, and it goes, with starch and things, it goes blue or turns purple, or any of these kind of things are essentially just mimicking what is happening on a charged front later on. They have found other things that when you put them with them, it's a basic dye. Yeah. And you will find when you reach to the end of any of these things, if you actually try and control for them. So if you go, oh, does it work with anything else? So does it work with non-protein? Well, yes, it does. Yeah, right. But because you're looking for proteins, you have to do it in a certain way, and you have to add a certain amount of acid for it to work. And if you don't add that certain amount of acid, well, then, okay, the test doesn't work, but you're just misusing or mistreating the test. Right. And so I said to this person, look, they are just finding this very particular band that if they add this much acid with this in this setting, yours has read low. Right. And okay, I think that there is a certain amount of feedback that you can get with any of these tests. When you test positive for a virus with PCR, I'm fairly sure that it does concord somewhat with detoxing and bringing your body back into balance. Right. So your body expels ionic content to bring itself back into balance. And the PCR is measuring that ionic content. And so there is somewhat that you can use these tests to indicate that you are ill. But the ultimate question is, why would you need a test to tell you whether you were ill or not?
That's the whole thing. It's like,
this is my test, and it's all encompassing for testosterone, for viral infections, for anything. Do you feel ill? How do you feel?
Exactly. And that's the whole point of it, because you can't isolate anything within the body. Even if we said, when I get sunlight, I'm getting 36 different hormonal reactions simultaneously. So
Yeah,
that's trillions of different reactions occurring simultaneously that we don't have instruments that we can measure. So we don't
yeah,
know exactly what it's doing, but you can tell if I go out in the sun, I feel better. I feel more
yeah,
energized.
yeah,
People that were in sanatoriums used to lay out in the sunlight and they got better.
yeah,
So that's what we know about it. Most of it we
exactly.
don't know. But like when you're having symptoms, why would you want to go in and have a test from an industry that's only looking for things that they can adjust those markers with drugs to say, look, Jamie, is working. So you
That's right.
tested positive when you came in with the PCR for whatever they want to make up because it has a signature, which is very
That's right.
crafty on their part because they know exactly what they're doing. They
That's
know
right.
exactly how to manipulate these things. And then they can say, now it's testing negative because I gave you some antibiotics, which they know will get rid of the lysis, the cells lysing or the excess cellular debris or whatever is happening when a person is in symptom mode, detoxing,
Exactly.
right? And so,
Yeah, they are treating the symptoms, but through negating the tests. I just had a chap, another one in a long list, whom I'm going to be writing an article about, um, who Dutch male that was diagnosed HIV positive, refused to take the ARVs, and has been very awake to the fraud of HIV, and has managed to lower his PCR viral load of HIV without any of the medication by essentially looking at it through the lens that the ARVs are adjusting the ionic content within your blood. And it's as simple as that. He managed to decrease his viral load, all in quotation marks, from 900,000 copies, which is pretty drastic, 6 months later to 19,000, which is considered low.
right.
So, and that's entirely without antiretroviral medication. It's just understanding that the marker for that thing is merely just a marker for an inference of something
Yeah.
that is nothing to do with what they're telling you. And
Well,
so,
it's almost like it's a snapshot of a wave, and I'm supposed to tell you about the ocean based on that
exactly.
snapshot of the ever-changing wave, like back to this testosterone, them checking it. Well, men can stand up straight, put their shoulders back, and it increases their testosterone levels. They can
Yeah.
stand around other men in a gym that are posturing, and their testosterone levels rise. So it's a wave that we're
Yes.
taking a snapshot of and telling you about the ocean.
Yeah.
It's meaningless.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, well, there was a wave that was this particular shape, that particular size. And so we get into the minutia now. We're going to spend all our time examining this wave with a microscope, and then I'm going to prescribe you drugs based on that wave to fix the ocean.
Yeah. I mean, I would go even further with that analogy that I don't think that it has anything to do with, the water in general. Like, it's kind of like measuring a buoy, right? Like a buoy going up and down. It's still kind of, you know, the wave to the ocean. It's not even the wave because you're just measuring a kind of buoy, like lateral vertical movement. And you don't know whether it's the wave making the buoy go up and down or whether it's just somebody standing in the middle of the ocean yanking on it, right? Like there is no way for you to know because there is no direct evidence that it's the wave that's
I
moving it.
see. I see. That
And
makes a lot
so,
of sense
yeah,
too.
I would kind of push that analogy further because I think that going all the way back to the start, that we are so far deep into the levels of equations upon equations that Mr. Tesla claimed that, you know, that were being added, that we're so far removed from reality where they are taking that height of a boy measurement, whether it is, you know, 0 centimeters level plane of water, or whether it's, you know, 5 meters up yanking on the chain.
Right.
And we are trying to infer that, you know, there will be something that can change that, or infer that it actually means anything, or the
And it means
reason why
anything.
it does. And you can use, and what's being done is that they're saying, every single time you go in for a test, they compartmentalize you. They compartmentalize you by diagnosis. And when you look back through, it's kind of like the magic trick where, or the magicians, or I think it's more like psychological magic, where seances, you know, where
Yeah.
the TV people come in. There's a guy called Colin somebody or other, he used to do it, I think he's dead now, in the UK, where he'll get a whole audience of people in front of them, and he will say, I'm hearing the name Brian. And, you know, a little old lady, bless her, will go, oh, my old Brian, you know, he died. And he was like, yeah, he died, yeah. He had this affinity with the color blue. She'd be like, he, you know, he supported a football team that was blue. It doesn't matter what it was. There will be some relevance to blue. We live by the sea. It can be anything. It's just open-ended stuff. And what they're doing is just basically getting you to put yourself into a path where essentially they can show you the same snapshot of anything, and you've made up, or they've kind of through suggestibility pulled you down this track of pigeonholing you into something where they can sell you a drug, where they can put you on medication or put you into surgery, or, you know, essentially onboard you into the allopathic death cult. And whether it be testosterone, whether it be antiretrovirals, whether it be vitamins for you know, depression, there's always an end product with that. And they suggested, okay, I have low libido. Well, immediately, okay, well, that's not going to be, you know, antiretrovirals potentially. That, you know, they're kind of segmenting you down that road, and they will show you the same snapshot at the end of it, which is, we've taken a test, we've shown that the buoy level on the sea is currently 2 meters.
Right.
But if you went in, and what would be quite funny is the kind of control of going, you know, take 100 people and all tell the other person's story of how they feel. That person goes in to test for a virus, and that person goes in to test for low testosterone. And you'll probably find that all of these things would match up, you know, just the people that were feeling ill tested positive for HIV, for low testosterone, for low vitamin D, for yada, 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 you know? And this is the thing, is when you have all of these tests that are essentially inferences for vague ill health, it doesn't matter what you go in for. I think it's just incumbent to understand that A, the tests aren't telling you anything, but B, that the things that they're going to give you only affect the test, not actually your health.
That's the whole point. And I even had I think he's a chiropractor, some of the funnest on my show, and he was talking about how he couldn't understand how his wife and him had both tested positive for Lyme's disease, yet he had no symptoms, and his load, whatever this test was so much higher than hers, yet he had no symptoms. And I said, wouldn't you conclude that it's a faulty test, or that maybe there's no such thing as Lyme's disease, or that, you know, something else is going on there? But no, it was, then we get into the minutia of, well, why don't I have symptoms? what's going on inside my body that I can have Lyme's disease yet have no symptoms.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have Lyme's disease. Maybe Lyme's disease is made up. Is what I said, but it's you can just see the wheels turning. They don't get
Yeah.
it. They're
I
looking.
mean, there's such a kind of push in that area, isn't there, that it's the spirochetes of
Yeah, the tick.
bioengineered tick that has been, and they want you to fear the natural world,
Exactly.
whether it be, oh, we're not getting enough sunshine, or we're getting too much sunshine and it causes skin cancer, or we can't walk in the countryside because there are these tiny little ticks that are going to bite you, and then,
Well, here
and
it's the mosquitoes, but I mean all of this that we're talking about, I think relates to I think even the chemical industry could make up Nikola Tesla to have him support everything that they are pushing towards. Like CRISPR technology is a way that then they can patent nature. So these big organizations can say, hey, this bacteria is mine. I made
yes,
it through CRISPR technology. If you're caught using my bacteria, which is just a wild bacteria, but I said that I've made it, then I take you out of business. I tie you up in courts for the rest of your life, and you're going to be paying all these fines for using my wild bacteria that I've
mm,
patented.
yeah,
But it's the same thing that they're doing, these chemical giants with the industry, so that they come into the extension offices here and they'll say the mites on the bees are causing bee collapse, bee colony collapse, and you
yeah,
have to treat the mites with our chemicals. Or the fennel in the parks is invasive. We call it invasive, so you're going to treat it with the chemicals. The HIV test is positive, so you're going to treat it with the chemicals. It's kind of the identical playbook for all of it.
yes.
And they'll use the periodic sales of elements to justify it. They'll use the isolation myths to justify it. They'll use all of their tests to justify whether it's Roundup that you spray on the fields or whether they call it an antibiotic, it's the same thing. That's now what all of these narratives are pushing.
No, you make a really salient point there that they are trying to trademark biology. They're doing that more recently through genetics, and it's the equivalent of a money printer machine.
Yes.
Money printer goes brrr because the way that it works within quantitative easing is, as soon as they took it off a fiat currency or gold, the gold standard, you move into the digital realm, and so again, it's an inference of money. Right. I mean, that's the perfect kind of analogy. What you're dealing with in terms of digital money is an inference of actual real money. It's just a kind of, nothing transaction. And when you can input however many zeros into this finite thing, you
Right.
are basically adding nothing. It's just intrinsic. And so you make a fantastic point that it's kind of, if you can trademark biology by saying this particular bacteria, and it's always really funny when you read all of these things and they're quite clearly from people, right? There's
Right.
scientists that, oh, this is Hashimoto's bacteria or whatever that
Yeah.
causes this or doesn't do anything because Mr. Hashimoto found it in a petri dish, and it had a different genetic sequence from Mr. Perkins over here, who had, he thought he had the same bacteria, but actually, they can literally make any money they like,
Yes.
any inference they like, because they start with the same thing, and you could have a billion starting with the same bacteria because you've measured their genetic sequence and it changes by one nucleotide every time. Hey presto, you
Yeah.
have a billion new saleable commodities overnight purely based on the fraudulent nature of a test.
Exactly. And
And
and only the ones then that are at the multi-million dollar corporations are going to be able to do this. So no one
No,
will be able to compete and make vitamins,
correct.
supplements. I mean, it's a brilliant system if you're a
It
corporate
is.
psychopath.
Yeah, I mean, the only people with access to being added the zeros is central banking, right?
Yeah.
So the one computer, it's not a different computer to anybody else. It's just the fact that it's in the central bank and they have access to, put it into quote unquote the economy. They go, okay, we'll add 10 trillion zero zero zero. Is that trillion or a billion? I don't know. Who cares? There you go.
Yeah,
It doesn't make any
exactly.
difference. And so um, and you're right. And I think that you analyzed it perfectly, that it all kind of stems back to a lot of the original stuff was from the period, the fable of elements,
Yeah,
because it was the initial classification. It's that initial kind of realization that they could just kind of compartmentalize stuff into
yeah,
little boxes and sell it back to people as the real world.
yeah,
They were like, this is the real world
yeah.
compartmentalized into stuff. It's like the kind of QVC, shopping channel thing where they
That's
go, and
exactly.
you can buy a calendar with the real world in it. It's like,
Yeah,
what do you mean? It's like, well, this is the real world in a calendar format because it has lithium and potassium, and you're like, well, okay, but it's not the real world, is it? Because this makes my tongue go fizzy, and that's all it does, right?
yeah.
That's a
Yeah, I mean,
pretty
it would be
crap
like
advent calendar.
they figured out that you can take these massive quantities of the elements of the earth, like basically saying I can convert sand into gold.
Yeah,
Instead, it's chalk and just add a few more chemicals, and you have something that you can sell back to the population. But my last question, because we're running out of time, this went really, really fast, but why, and I don't know the answer to this, but why do you think people are so vehemently attached to their vitamins and their supplements more than other people are to their prescription drugs? They're like,
yeah.
amlodepine's bad. They're like, oh yeah, I know. I wish I could get off that one. But when you say magnesium is bad,
Mm.
better wear a bulletproof vest.
It's it's a great question. I think we could have an episode on just on that. So I'll try and be brief. It's multifactorial, of course, most things are. I think a large part of it is to do with the controlled opposition that are pushing this idea that you have the Hegelian dialectic, where people who have woken up to what they think is the pharmaceutical fraud. So, they may understand that chemotherapy is bad. They certainly will understand that vaccinations are bad. But then the majority of people that are pushing these things, that are in the limelight, that are the names and faces that are pushed around the alternative circles, at the same time as saying big pharma are bad, but then are pushing big pharma chemicals in vitamin format or ivermectin or any of these things, all made by Merck, all distributed by big pharmaceuticals, all industrial waste products that they just again needed to repackage and sell back to you.
Yeah,
All just drugs with their own long list of detrimental side effects, being, in the case of vitamin D, death.
right.
Um, so that's a huge factor, is that people just unfortunately fall for people's con stories, selling them the crap back that the pharmaceutical industry has repackaged and given out to the alternative controlled opposition. The second part to it is that I think that it's, again, propaganda pushed out in the same notion that vaccines are bad, but really, and I had trouble with this writing the vitamin D article, even though it's 140 pages long. When it comes to the actual, even though the mainstream medical authorities, they still aren't quite there with like pointing at vitamin D even though the controlled opposition, and that's kind of how you know that they are part of the establishment, is that the establishment still haven't really kind of gone there with vitamin D and pointing out the real kind of dangers of it. They went through in 1930 and 1940 when they fortified huge amounts of baby formula, which they're doing now, by the way. Baby formula, kids yogurts, they're going for the kids with this stuff. And breastfeeding mothers. In the 30s and 40s, they had to admit to killing, literally thousands of kids because they heavily fortified with vitamin D, rat poison, baby formula, and bread and milk. And they admitted it almost a century later, and they went with would you know it, a genetic cause. So they just went, oh yeah, the reason why not every kid died then is because it was a certain gene that they had to have and it affected them more, yada yada yada. It's just bullshit, right? Nothing to do with the fact that it could have been that they had higher concentrations, or any of their environment, they were being given other drugs at the same time, because none of the pharmaceutical, companies do this where they take other drugs and give them to them at the same time, right? Where they go, okay, we'll test, kind of the whole kind of thing. So the second part to answer to that question is obviously a very large part, but the indoctrination that people don't understand, the fraud of kind of the dangers of it itself is not really kind of where you have vaccination. You have a whole load of people, even though they're controlled opposition, that are selling you the vitamins. At the end of the day, they are pointing at every single person that is falling, over from a heart attack from 2021 to 2026 and going, that was a vaccine. Well, It could have been a vaccine. It also could have been a vaccine and high vitamin D, because it calcifies your blood and causes heart attacks, right?
Exactly.
So it could well be that and this is why I think that there is a very skewed thing amongst, of data amongst anti-vaxxers. Clearly, not everybody has died. And I say that I think that it is possible, this is pure logic, that you can have a vaccine, you can have a few vaccines and be all right.
Yeah.
Because people have.
Yeah. By
the same token, I think that you can have one vaccine and drop dead because you've been plying yourself with all sorts of vitamins and supplements and processed food and alcohol and recreational drugs. And so I think that it's just a tapestry, a drug terrain of the amount of toxins and chemicals that you are ingesting. And so I guess that's the kind of, again, we could talk about this for an entire
the psychology behind it, because
the psychology behind it, the placebo effect of people taking it with vitamin D is that the depression in the winter thing, they just kind of came up with this thing. Oh, I feel sad because it's raining outside. I don't know, again, it's just a marker. Like, how sad are you? Well, the computer tells you that you're feeling sad. You should take some rat poison. And
there's even a disorder named after it.
And people like to take these quick fixes, don't they? They like to take something. They don't want the truth, that it's like, I had to come to the realization myself, because I made the mistake of taking vitamin D and found out for myself, because I had heart palpitations in the night, and I was in that mind frame that I could just fix my health of abusing my body, which I did through my 20s and into large parts of my 30s, where I heavily drank, I smoked, took recreational drugs, ate processed food, just junk food all the time. I abused myself and I abused my body, and I paid the price for it.
Yeah.
And I made the decision that I was going to make a healthy change. But in my mind, what that looked like was, oh, well, I'll just supplement back every single cigarette that I had. I can just kind of take a pill and it'll like do the negative effect of what happened with the cigarette. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's mental.
Yeah. No, I think
People
that's
don't want to know the truth that you're dealing with almost probably the same amount of time that you abuse your body to undo it.
yeah.
Probably not quite the amount. I think that the body is amazing if you let it do what it does, but you're not talking weeks and months to undo a decade's worth of damage. You're talking years.
Right. And it's your responsibility. And that's the thing. It's a lot easier to think, well, I can everything in balance, so I'm going to have my alcohol and my cigarettes, but maybe just on the weekends, and then I'll take the vitamins to make up for it. Instead of when the real responsibility is onto you for your health and research, not relying on your favorite influencer, savior, guru to tell you what to put in your body, then
Yeah,
it's a completely different story. And I think that's what we're talking about is, you finally enter into adulthood and
yeah,
you start to not just take responsibility for yourself, but you start to understand that the planet at whole can't thrive if we're all walking around sick, weak, dependent on these drugs and vitamins and supplements and chemicals because it's costing a lot more than I think just by taking a small dose of rat poison and slowly poisoning yourself.
yeah.
The industry itself that's poisoning the mind. And that's why I really wanted to talk about the isolation myth because I really want to get at the root of how they started to brainwash a nation into thinking a pill, a chemical, a set of synthetic chemicals is somehow going to keep you healthy more than
Yeah.
the same chemicals in a prescription drug.
I mean, fortunately, we're living in a time where we have the best lab rat that's just occurred with what we're talking about with a guy called Brian Johnson, right? Who, tipped himself as I'm going to live forever by taking
Yeah,
every supplement under the
right,
sun, right? So we have our own control study. The
right.
guy is he in his late 40s? Yeah, so
Okay.
he's a tiny bit older than myself, and prided himself on the fact that he was basically doing every single supplement industry
Yeah,
vitamin that could throw at it. He spent millions of dollars with all of these experts in their field, quote unquote, to take every single biomarker possible. Every
right.
single lab test he's had thrown at it. It doesn't matter what it is, he's had it tested and had it done to him and taken a pill for it every day. And what happened? Did he live forever? No, he lived for 18 months before he had to admit on social media that, quote, his stomach was eating itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And we have,
here we
and
have
that's
it.
the thing, though, Jamie.
I
Like
think I
we have countless people who have been taking vitamins. My mother was one of them, handfuls of Shackley vitamins
hmm,
her whole life. And she just kept, the next one and the next one and the miracle cure and this next elixir and wouldn't listen to anyone. And it wasn't until she went into the hospital 3 different times, finally would come back and didn't take the vitamins and supplements the last time. 5 years later, she's thriving,
yeah,
has no
yeah,
issues, no prescription drugs, no vitamins, no supplements, and she has no problems. At 93,
yeah,
her body was able to repair itself. But you and I could sit here for the next 10 years, and you and I can go over case by case by case, and yet we're the villains. Like we're the ones that are doing something wrong.
yeah. I mean, it's there's always vested interest, isn't there? The
Yeah,
majority of people that attack us, you do a very quick search, and they invariably are
so
selling this stuff, right? They are making
exactly.
bank off of doing it, so they will attack you. Um,
Yeah,
and if not, people people do just kind of ascribe themselves with a diagnosis like they do with a pill. And so I think the other portion, I think the vast majority just are making bank off of it. And so they attack you. And the rest are just people that have ascribed their personality to it. They see within a diagnosis. So you get told that you have a diagnosis. You have fibromyalgia. Uh, uh, you have
Chronic fatigue
ADHD,
syndrome, yeah,
you're
major
on the
depressive
spectrum for
disorder, yeah,
autism. All of these things
yeah,
are um wafty diagnoses that have no cure, according to the medical establishment. And more often than not, they are literally just the checkbook for the the biochemical fraud for the
yeah,
pharmaceutical industry, because you get given a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, and you type that into YouTube, and you will immediately hit on about 1,000 people that are selling you supplements, vitamins specifically, that have claimed to work for fibromyalgia. And you will see underneath it that there will be about 100 people. Oh, I took this and it was amazing, and I
yeah,
don't feel my fibromyalgia. And they're all just the person who are shilling the
yeah,
vitamins, that have got either bots or made enough accounts that they have written their own testimonials underneath them.
yeah.
And there are people, well-meaning people, that have just fallen into that fraud, where the initial diagnosis doesn't mean anything. And so they can be plied with rat poison and go, I've taken the
Yeah.
rat poison and I don't feel my fibromyalgia anymore. It's because the initial diagnosis was nothing. They've just given you
Exactly.
this diagnosis that you then go. And the kind of ultimate end to this is cancer. And I've just recently written a thing about an article about an ebook about cancer. And it's the same thing. People almost, I've met at parties where new people, where they almost want to tell you that they have cancer before they tell you their name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They introduce themselves, and they are so heavily invested in
Yes.
what they've been told they have,
Right.
or a kind of grade below that is the pills that they're on,
Exactly.
to contradict it, that it has become part of their personality, that when you say fibromyalgia is a bullshit made up diagnosis, they immediately see it as and you don't need to take any pills for it. They immediately see that as an insult to them. They take it personally. And so they're either making bank off of it, or they have ascribed themselves a disease that is so invested in their character that they see it as an attack on their character by saying it doesn't exist.
Well, yeah, because it's become who they are as a person. And so instead of me coming to a party and doing it based on my merits, what I've been writing about, or my sports activities, just something that makes me an interesting person, I don't have to do anything but be a chronic victim. And now
Yes.
everyone's going to see me as special and give me that attention, which is why people lead with that story of the cancer, like, oh, F cancer, you poor thing. So now you're important. Now you have all of this attention, but it's never satisfying, which is why people keep upping the ante. Well, now I'm going to have it fatal. Now I'm going to have stage 4 to get that same level of attention. But we're going to have to end here. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do a part 2 because we just got started. Like you said, the last one, we were here about 2 or 3 hours. We could probably go another 2 or 3 hours, because it's this, I think what we're actually touching on is the root of all of this brainwashing and control. And personally, I'm not going to stop until the dam has broken with this whole chemical warfare on the entire population. So, Jamie Andrews, thank you so much. All of the links that you can find him are down below. If you want more from Jamie and me, you can join us in September for a Truth Be Told, where we'll be joining Agent 131711 and David Parker and Unbecoming for, I think, to be quite a powerful 6-hour day.
Yeah, that's it. I'm going to be talking about how to run kind of experiments for
Yeah.
yourself, just as a layman, about scientific projects, and just talking you through how I did it and how easy it is to actually find out the truth for yourself. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the, main things is kind of discerning the truth for yourself rather than necessarily taking what me or you say as gospel. And I think we're kind of both the same, that we don't want that kind of authority. We want people to think for themselves, and
Yeah.
we're trying to educate people to think for themselves. And
Yeah, it's giving everyone the power back into your own hands, your own family's hands, how to treat medical emergencies, when to call 911, and what you can safely do at home. And like you said, run your own experiments. Then we're not relying on anyone and their cartoon characters and a bank account waiting to siphon from ours. You can actually see for yourself and you start to think for yourself and start to run things in our own kitchens, and then the power is back in the people without any protest or guns fired.
that's it. So 17th of September, and
September 17th.
I think we're both going to put the links underneath in our respective channels.
Yes. All right, Jamie.
All right, thank you, Robin. Yeah, it was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you for joining us for another incredible episode of the Medicine Girl podcast, where our mission is to ignite the power within so you can hear your divine wisdom and follow your soul's true north. Fear is loud, peace is quiet. Listen to the softest voice. We are all walking each other home.